In my Music Mythos episode devoted to Michael Jackson, I made it emphatically known that I do not believe he was ever a pedophile. Look at how Michael Jackson behaved when it was actually time for him to break the law. When he wanted to illegally anesthetize himself with propofol, he found Conrad Murray, a doctor with financial problems and a checkered past. In short, someone he could manipulate, someone he had leverage on, successfully covering his tracks quite literally until after his death in fear of the minor fine and possible community service sentence that would result from being convicted of such. But the Chandler and Arvizo families want us all to believe that when it came time for Michael Jackson to deflower a child, a crime that could put him away for the remainder of his life and ruin his entire career in the process, his master plan boiled down to, hey, hop on the bed in full view of your brother and we'll jerk each other off. I submit that given Michael's provable tactical acumen, not to mention financial resources, if he ever actually had diddled a kid, we wouldn't have ever heard one mumbling fucking word about it. The fact that there even was a trial is to me almost proof enough that Michael Jackson never inappropriately laid a hand on a kid in his life. I asserted my reasons effectively, I feel, but the time constraints involved also, I felt, made my rebuttal a cursory one by nature. I'd always intended to append those thoughts with something more in-depth and comprehensive at a later date, and then, just this past week, the story broke, providing me with just such an opportunity. Look, you've been forewarned. Today's video is not primarily comedic in nature, but rather a categorical defense of Michael Jackson, a man no longer alive to defend himself. I would first, to that end, like to extend my condolences to the family of Michael Jackson, most specifically his children, who through no fault of their own or their father's have been made to endure an onslaught of idiocy based on laughable evidence and thanks to a remorseless media with an axe to grind, one that simply will not die. You're not alone. Pun only slightly intended. Some of us do know the facts, and your father's innocence, once you look at those facts, is immutable. Never weaken. We're with you in spirit, and Godspeed. I would be further remiss not to acknowledge attorney Tom Mesereau's tireless advocacy of Michael Jackson's innocence. It's easy to assume a celebrity defense attorney is merely in it for the Skrilla, and Tom has certainly made his. But the fact that Mr. Mesereau hasn't been employed by Jackson or his estate since 2005, yet never misses an opportunity to publicly articulate the case for his innocence in exhaustive detail more than a decade hence, is proof to me that his stance is more about principle than payola. I'm unashamed to admit that it's precisely through the promulgative efforts of Mr. Mesereau that I was first exposed to some of the more pertinent exculpatory evidence you will now be treated to. For further information on this topic, if you're interested, I cannot recommend his lectures, interviews, and writings vociferously enough. Now, before we move on with the body of today's rebuttal, we have to address and I employ the loosest possible interpretation of the word here, allegations that broke this past week, contending that during 2003's raid of Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch, a veritable deluge of pedo porn, some of it violent and even bestial in nature, was recovered in the process. To quote Winston Churchill, a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to get its pants on. And true to form, before anyone had seen fit to vet this story and verify that it conforms to the facts long since committed to public record, everyone from Jezebel.com to Breitbart News to the Huffington Post hit us with a hailstorm of horse shit. I'm not going to linger on this over much because the story's less than a week old and its efficacy has already begun to erode before our very eyes. But even a perfunctory glance at the evidence in the 2005 case reveals this to be bullshit squared. As FBI and court documents clearly show, the only article the prosecution could even vaguely construe as pedophilic was a coffee table book of art photography featuring fair-haired foundlings frolicking the fuck through dewy meadows, swimming in lakes, and other assorted stand-by-me shit. It's not only not pornographic, it's an art photography bestseller. Pretty much any asshat with a black turtleneck and a Nikon owns one. If that constitutes kiddie porn, well, you better lock up that Michelangelo prick because the Sistine Chapel is a palace of pedophilia. Hell, at a certain point in the trial, the prosecution were so desperate for viable evidence, they tried to attach a Hustler magazine recovered from Michael's home with Gavin Arvizo, the 2003 accuser. His fingerprints, they argued, were found on the magazine. The problem? His fingerprints were on the magazine because the prosecution had taken it out of its protective bag and handed the fuck to Gavin Arvizo during pre-trial interviews.
The three felonies that I observed firsthand and have firsthand knowledge of: fingerprint evidence, fabrication. The magazine had not been printed till 4, 5, 6 months after the
I'm sorry, Mr. Wagoner, your time is up.
And it was all captured on tape. You mean to tell me the prosecution were scraping the bottom of the evidentiary barrel so exquisitely goddamn hard that they went so far as to tamper with state's evidence, nearly inciting a retrial in the process, but they gave a mountain of kiddie torture porn a pass? Yes, seems fucking legit, Review Tech USA. Not that I expect sexual discernment from a baggy-eyed beluga so improbably fucking fat he couldn't pick his own cock out of a fucking lineup. Why don't you confine yourself to what you stick to best? E-drama, pedestrian opinions, and your own goddamn computer chair. You want to talk red flags and common sense, you diabetic golem? How about the red flag of none of this shit being entered into evidence? So no, I don't believe Michael Jackson was a pedophile, and I've made that determination based entirely on empirical fact, mind you. Something the story, originally leaked by inveterate tabloid Radar Online, did not traffic in whatsoever. Not one article of evidence, not one witness statement, a leaked video of the Neverland raid itself that does not show the recovery of one item of pornography, straight, gay, or otherwise, and what little horseshit and hearsay it does proffer is contradicted by publicly available FBI and Santa Maria court documents that make not one solitary mention of any cow-fucking kitty porn having been recovered from Neverland Ranch. Hell, even the article in question links to another horrifically sourced article of an interview with one of Michael Jackson's many hush-hush girlfriends, in which she says in no uncertain terms that he didn't own child porn, boned bitches like it was going out of style, and emphatically states that he did not fuck kids. Not only does the evidence contradict the story, the fucking story contradicts the story. Breitbart, Jezebel, Huffington Post, and most importantly, Radar Online, you now have exactly one job. Either corroborate your claims with substantive evidence, or retract this defamatory dog shit fucking yesterday. The man is dead. He's dead largely because of his inability to deal with the unceasing barrage of bullshit, unsourced, opprobrious tripe like this, and if no one else is gonna speak up in his defense, then fuck you! I'll erect a finger and do it myself. And with that, we move on to the rebuttal at large. Whereas, depending on who you ask, descriptions of the 2005 Arvizo molestation case can vacillate from he was guilty but they just couldn't prove it, to railroad job to the umpteenth power and embarrassment to the legal profession at large, public sentiment for the original allegations in '93 are about as mixed as the Aryan youth. As such, in preparing this comprehensive rebuttal of the recent spurious allegations that Michael Jackson owned gruesome child pornography, I came to one sobering realization, folks. Categorically obliterating these accusations would be impossible without focusing almost exclusively on the 1993 accuser that for some ludicrous reason everyone still largely believes in fact was molested. His name? Jordan Chandler, but sadly as we roll the fuck on here, I think you'll see the child was really a secondary accessory to a successful extortion attempt by another man, one who committed suicide just months after Jackson's death by the name of Evan Chandler. While some overzealous Jackson fans have ascribed motive to the suicide, claiming he was awash with guilt, the man left no suicide note I'm aware of, so to hypothesize as to his mental state beyond being in profoundly poor taste would be an exercise in futility. And given that rampant speculation without proof is what largely got Michael Jackson in this position to begin with, I would hope his fan base would recognize the perils of perpetrating the very same against his extortionist. And make no mistake, Evan Chandler was an extortionist.
This man is going to be humiliated beyond belief. He will not believe it. He will not believe what's going to happen to him. Yeah. Beyond his worst nightmares. Sell one more record. If I go through with this, I win big time. I will get everything I want. They will be destroyed forever.
That phone call is from after Jordan Chandler was allegedly molested. Yet not one word about his son having been victimized, despite the fact that theoretically the wound would have still been fresh at that point. Instead of an indignant father, we get a rather callous, cold, and calculating assertion about Evan Chandler's plan to destroy Michael Jackson if he doesn't get, quote, what he wants. And what he wanted, folks, was Hollywood success. Evan Chandler, you see, was a dentist by trade, one with a pattern of behavior showing he had a tendency to latch onto famous figures and leech them fucking dry. lie. A chance encounter with Mel Brooks, one we're still not certain wasn't engineered as a favor from Michael Jackson, would lead to Evan Chandler being the screenwriter and co-producer of Robin Hood Men in Tights. But as Michael's favors began to dry up, so did Evan Chandler's affection for the King of Pop. An adversarial relationship, one that mirrored in many respects Michael's own struggle with his domineering father, developed, that led the divorce-afflicted Chandler child to turn to Michael Jackson for comfort and companionship in lieu of his biological parents. Then Evan Chandler hooked up with prosecuting attorney Larry Feldman, whose moral repute, to put it bluntly, falls somewhere between Johnny Cochran and Snidely Whiplash. And I note that many people fond of employing the term red flags in connection with Michael Jackson's interest in children fall mysteriously goddamn silent when it's pointed out that Larry Feldman consulted in both the 1993 molestation case and the 2005 case with Gavin Arvizo. That's right, both cases involve the same limber dick fucking lawyer. Motherfucker, there ain't a flag big enough or a color red enough to convey the conflict of interest there. But hey, at least the same vindictive-ass district attorney pushed both cases despite a dearth of evidence and a surfeit of hearsay. Otherwise, I might actually think there was a fucking professional vendetta at play or something. Then Evan Chandler, a dentist by trade, hooked up with Jordan's stepfather, the co-conspirator recorded on a phone call I just played earlier, and scheduled an impromptu dental exam with his son.
There was a great article in GQ done by a journalist named Mary Fisher, and she went back and she had proof that Evan Chandler, this man who just committed suicide, and the current husband of his wife, Ben, the stepfather, had conspired to create this situation, and that they actually drugged the kid in the dentist's office and got him to say things that weren't true about Michael.
That's right, the original confession was elicited while Jordan Chandler was under the influence of laughing gas. Look, we will never know exactly what occurred in that dentist chair, but if you're arguing that the existence of a leading question or 17 or even outright suggestion is an Olympian leap of logic here, you are far more trusting soul than I, my friend, particularly given the menacing tone of the recorded phone calls in question. For all the talk of Neverland Ranch's creepy pedophilic undertones by the flopping flaccid dickheads in the tabloid media, it should interest you to discover that the 1993 accuser never claimed to have been molested at Neverland. He claimed rather that he was molested in Monaco. What you're about to watch is a clip from an indescribably biased documentary from 2007, rife with factual inaccuracies, whose entire premise is that Michael Jackson was a pedophile. But what it does function as is a bit of a primer for the accusations themselves, so take what you're about to watch with a grain of bullshit.
The honeymoon with Jordy Chandler in Monaco was interesting on several levels because they traveled there for the awards ceremony, the World Music Awards, but he took not only Jordy Chandler but his mother and his sister. In very typical fashion, he gave the mother a credit card and said, go shopping. It was just Jordy and Michael in that room.
Only Michael Jackson and Jordy can ever really know what happened in that room. But all we know for sure is that while the awards ceremony continued, Jackson and Jordy remained in the suite.
Having now absorbed that cyclopean dollop of disinformation, briefly plant yourself in Chester Molester's pedopumps. You're Michael Jackson, a provably shrewd, calculating individual. You learned the moonwalk in the late 70s, yet waited nearly 5 years to break it the fuck out at Motown 25 for precisely the right moment to catapult you to superstardom. Through raw business acumen and cunning, you now own the two most remunerative musical catalogs in existence outside your fucking own, purchasing half of Sony Music Publishing in the process. While you may not be a pedophile, you've certainly committed lesser crimes in the past. Doctor shopping, illicit and prescription drug addiction. Yet you were so adept at crossing every T and dotting every I that not even your wife knew you may have a problem until you outright collapsed on stage.
Did you suspect a drug problem?
Honestly, I didn't really suspect and catch on until just before I filed for divorce. You know, there was just an incident where he had collapsed, and he was in the hospital.
This is during the HBO.
This was an appearance he was supposed to make.
And now it's time to apply that canny tactical acuity. You want to butt fuck a kid. You have a choice of time and location. A cavernous, sprawling Neverland estate with countless winding corridors and cozy hidden rooms and compartments away from prying eyes, replete with security guards, a silent alarm system, and a secret fireplace exit?
I was in his room of accomplishments, looking at his platinums, and then I turned around and I seen a chess set. It was platinum and gold. And I did not know, because I thought I came in the one door, which is the only way in and the only way out. But didn't know that he had a secret door from the fireplace that was a fake fireplace. Wow. It was a door. He came in that door, and it's so quiet. I thought, you know, when you hear doors, you hear no sound. So he came behind me and put his hand on my shoulder, and I fell to my feet. He started busting out laughing at me.
Or a 5-star European hotel you've been photographed at with the child while a bodyguard is present and while suffering from the fucking flu.
So why did no one stop him? Not the police, not Geordie's mother, and not Jackson's manager.
On the suite of the awards, Geordie and Michael were in there with flu.
I got the doctor to come. They said they had the flu, so to get a doctor. And the mother and daughter went out shopping to Italy, and they were in the suite with the flu.
I don't know about you, but nothing brings my apathetic crank to full fucking attention like nasal phlegm and 100-degree fevers. I mean, if Michael had been so inclined, and he wasn't, folks, he basically had a ready-made pedo chateau at Neverland, and the Chandlers want us all to believe he decided to bone the kid on foreign soil in the completely uncontrollable environs of the World Music Awards in Monaco while they were both miserably ill, and not one fucking day after Michael Jackson was photographed with the accuser and his sister bouncing on his butt fucking lap. It more than strains credulity, people. It obliterates it, annihilates it, bends it over the mantle and spanks it harder than a porn star with daddy issues. Oh, into the walking pair of crow's feet in the documentary flapping her spray tan jowls about Michael bouncing Jordan Chandler up and down on his lap.
He was bouncing Geordie up and down on his lap. His nickname for the boy was Rubba. Whispering, Rubba, Rubba.
Yeah, well, unless Jordan Chandler got a JonBenet makeover, that appears to be his sister bouncing up and down on Michael's lap. And so long as we're correcting flagrant factual errors, Bob Jones was never Michael Jackson's manager. He was a fucking publicist. Yet this documentary aired with this ceaseless procession of screaming circumstantial inaccuracies, uncut from the broadcast, with nary a toffee-nosed twat at Channel 4 in the UK so much as raising a bushy brow at something publicly available footage proves was a bald-faced fucking lie. Are you beginning to better understand the daisy chain of disinformation plucked from the tabloid press playbook in effect wherever Michael Jackson is concerned? The reasons for this coverage, however, have never been mysterious.
When I came to New York and asked them I told them I wanted to publish a book that was going to talk about Michael Jackson not guilty, they said, we don't want anything that's pro-Jackson. And I actually called even one of the publishers that I've worked with for many years and spoke to the top person there. And she said, Aphrodite, I'm sorry, we can't do anything pro-Jackson. And I thought, this is wild. So in other words, the publishing world has decided that there will be nothing pro-Jackson, even though a courtroom has exonerated this man.
The media worldwide were out to get Michael Jackson. The money was in a conviction. Okay? Berry Gordy, who founded Motown, told me after the acquittals that you cost the worldwide media billions by those not guilty verdicts because the kind of copy that his being convicted, remanded to jail, the build-up to a sentencing, which would have been the biggest sentencing in world history, was something they wanted. You know, this was big, big business. They were doing everything they could to spin a conviction.
No one said, oh my goodness, we're sorry. We reported all the wrong things. Let's make the record straight now. No. In fact, they ignored the not guilty verdicts, and the paparazzi went right into, oh, we think he might have molested another boy, or wow, somebody else came out of the woodwork. All these things were later found to be untrue, but they make great headlines on the cover of rag papers and sell tabloids.
The media has a habit of building its heroes, all but erecting monuments to their splendor, harvesting a monetary windfall from their rise, and then, often at a perfectly arbitrary point of their choosing, they take a sledgehammer to the very same, profiting by their Pompeian downfall thereby. From the great Britney Spears parasol rampage of 2007 to the Amanda Bynes batshit barrage, the only thing the media loves more than an idol is a fallen one. And for those arguing that the presence of the aforementioned alarm system is a portent to pedophilia, consider for a moment how deeply paranoid Michael Jackson had become by this point. Michael confided to everyone from friends to his then-wife Lisa Marie Presley that he believed Sony were actively trying to have him assassinated for half of his ownership in the company.
And then the final part of the conversation was him telling me that he felt that that someone was going to try and kill him to get a hold of his catalog and his estate. And I really didn't know what to do with that.
Something that, given the Japanese vultures picking the King of Pop's corpse clean in the aftermath, is looking less and less paranoid by the microsecond. As Lisa Marie and Jackson family members have alleged, he also engaged in illicit drug use during this period, largely stemming from serious burns he sustained during a Pepsi commercial in the 1980s. We just listened to Teddy Riley describe a platinum chess set in his duplex-sized bedroom. Are you honestly contending that a silent alarm system and a secret entrance is not a fairly mild expression of the King of Pop's proven paranoia? But what of the sleeping with young boys allegations? Well, let's place this once again in its appropriate context. The prosecution never said Michael sleeps in the same bed as young boys, although that in and itself wouldn't connote pedophilia either. They said he sleeps in the same room as young boys. The problem? Michael Jackson's bedroom was the size of a fucking duplex!
Well, first of all, Larry, this notion that he sleeps with boys was a concoction by the prosecution. What he said very openly was that he allows families into his room. Now, his room is the size of a duplex. It's 2 levels. He's had mothers sleep there, fathers sleep there, sisters sleep there, brothers sleep there. The prosecution concocted this little saying about sleeping with boys because they thought it would turn off the jury, and they failed.
Look, saying Michael Jackson sleeps in the same room as boys is like saying I slept in the same room as my dad growing up because we were all in the same house. This is not uncommon in people who purchase mansions, by the by. To isolate one section of the estate off to yourself and essentially live out of that exclusively, rarely if ever venturing to any other rooms in the mansion aside from special occasions. This harkens back to the Paleolithic underpinnings of our cave-dwelling ancestors. Roman columns are bitchin' and all, but all the human brain really wants at the end of the day is a nice cozy cave replete with meat and heat. So yeah, boys slept in Michael Jackson's 2-story fucking room. So did their parents. So did entire fucking families when they were staying there. But if there's one cause for skepticism where Michael's innocence is concerned that I can actually relate to, it's with the decision to settle the Jordan Chandler case out of court for a reputed $20 million. So why in the fuck did Michael Jackson pay $20 million to cover up a crime I and many other reasonable human beings thoroughly believe he never committed?
Mr. Jackson had entered into that settlement because business advisors told him to. They weren't writing the check. They wanted to get him to get going in his business life and stop being derailed by this very salacious legal proceeding, and that he regretted doing it.
It's interesting because that settlement money, which is around the ballpark of $20 million, is something that never leaves people's minds. It seems as though that will always continue to be a controversial aspect in the legacy of Michael Jackson.
Well, remember, he was a billionaire. This person had money-making opportunities around the world that were endless. This was someone who could wake up in the morning, decide to go to any capital in the world, and make millions of dollars if he wanted to. So the amount of money he paid was nothing compared to what he was worth and what he could earn. And the people around him said, Michael, write the check, get rid of the case, let's move on. We have so many business opportunities everywhere, on every continent, and that's what he did. And it came back to haunt him, unfortunately. I think it was the wrong advice. I think he should have fought it and won.
The media is more than willing to tell us all that Michael Jackson paid out $20 million to Jordan Chandler and $1 million apiece to his parents. What they seem almost habitually unwilling to provide is fucking context for that act. You see, the Chandlers, acting on advice from their shyster shitbag Larry Feldman, deliberately waited to level charges for several months until Michael Jackson had begun his tour for the Dangerous album. The tour was split up into 2 legs, with a brief respite for recuperation in between, and this was no fucking accident. What this did is immediately press Michael Jackson toward a very difficult no-win choice. Either fight the allegations in court, canceling the second leg of his first major tour under the Sony banner, pissing off both his record company, concert promoter, lawyers, and fans in the process, and engaging in a trial that, while I'm firmly convinced would have cleared him ultimately of wrongdoing, would have also been a deeply dehumanizing and embarrassing one for the self-conscious pop star regardless. Why dehumanizing and embarrassing, you ask? Well, anyone like myself in their late 20s, early 30s remembers the following newsreel footage with crystal fucking clarity.
I have been forced to submit to a dehumanizing and humiliating examination by the Santa Barbara County Sheriff Department and the Los Angeles Police Department earlier this week. They served a search warrant on me which allowed them to view and photograph my body, including my penis, my buttocks, my lower torso, thighs, and any other area that they wanted. They were supposedly looking for any discoloration, spotting, blotches, or other evidence of a skin color disorder called vitiligo, which I have previously spoken about.
So the police took PP Polaroids of one of the most self-conscious and insecure individuals on planet Earth and threatened to pass them around a courtroom in an effort to determine whether the accuser had correctly identified Jackos Johnson. Incidentally, he didn't. How do we know this? Because the Chandler family, during the pre-trial phase, purposefully omitted them from evidence, without, of course, informing Michael Jackson, who at this point was already being pressured to settle by everyone from Sony, with whom he just inked the most lucrative recording contract in history, and who fully expected a return on said investment, the concert promoters for his first major tour in support of Dangerous, and, as Jackson's attorney during the 2005 case has since confirmed, his settlement-happy legal team as fucking well.
And Howard Weitzman have always acted in what they believed were Michael Jackson's best interests, and I believe that they thought those settlements were the best result for Michael, that they wanted to keep him out of a courtroom and let him do his music and his performance art, get him away from the lawyers. I understand that completely. Unfortunately, I think the decision to settle those cases was a disaster, and I think the settlements opened Pandora's box and resulted in his criminal case in 2004, 2005, as well as the current Wade Robson, Jimmy Safechuck civil cases. Would they change their opinions about what happened? They appear to have completely changed their memory of the facts and are seeking money. I don't have great faith that Mr. Weitzman and Mr. Branco will try these cases effectively in front of a judge or jury. My guess is that if a judge does not throw these cases out, that there'll be a settlement and that money will be paid by the estate. I hope that doesn't happen, but my guess is that Mr. Branca and Mr. Weitzman do not want and defend. That's my guess. I don't know. I'm not in their minds. This case go to a public trial, and unfortunately, Robson and Safechuck's lawyers know that. They know they're being opposed by some lawyers with a history of being involved with Michael Jackson when he settled cases.
So if he goes to trial, sure, MJ would have been cleared. As we've already established, the evidence against him was laughable. It literally did not exist. In fact, we know this evidence is weak because much of it was used in the 2005 case and was promptly laughed the fuck out of court.
Anyone who followed the case knew about the issue of 1108 evidence, which in California is called prior bad acts evidence. And what California allows, and few states do allow, is that in a case like this, you can bring in evidence of other alleged similar acts, even if they were never charged with a crime, and even if they're not the essence of the charge in this particular case. So what they said in their opening statement was, we have evidence that 5 young men were molested, and we're going to present all of that to you. And to make it even worse, it appeared, the judge did something I've never seen happen in a case like this. With respect to 3 of those alleged 5 victims, he allowed witnesses to come in and say they saw them molested, without the prosecution having to bring the actual alleged victims in. They put on 3 guards who had worked at Neverland to say they saw these 3 people molested. One of them, Macaulay Culkin, okay, the actor, all right? Now, those 3 guards had sued Michael Jackson, claiming that he wrongfully terminated them. He had cross-complained, saying that they had stolen property from him. It was the longest civil trial in the history of Santa Maria. They lost their case. Jackson won his cross-complaint. He had $1 million judgment against all of them. There were judicial findings of fraud against all of them. They had gone to the tabloids and sold stories, and the 3 people they say they saw molested, they were my first 3 witnesses. They came in and said they were never touched.
So your options: fight, lose hundreds of millions canceling your first Sony World Tour, actively defy the legal advice of your attorneys and insurance company, engage in a court case where you have every reason to believe your vitiligo-afflicted genitals will be made a public spectacle, or the other option was to settle for $20 million. A lot to you and me, but to Michael Jackson, who at that time owned half of Sony's music publishing, is a water molecule in a drop in a bucket in a fucking ocean. Then continue on tour, make that money back in a single fucking night, and everyone from Sony to the concert promoter to all the people he employs during said tour go home happy, and his dong ain't dangling in front of a jury in all likelihood, half the slack-jawed goddamn nation in the process. I agree, it was a stupid decision. Incidentally, by the end, so did Michael. But it doesn't make him a pedophile. It makes him a deeply non-confrontational cat being pressured from all sides by disparate multi-million-dollar conglomerates who stood to lose a fuck of a lot of money, but whose self-respect and reputation were left mercifully off the chopping block in the process, while Michael was left to twist in the wind, as if I needed another reason to hate the shit out of Sony. In the aftermath, Jordan Chandler was actually emancipated from both of his parents, took his money, fucked off to the Hollywood Hills, and never spoke to them again. He was given a chance to testify in the 2005 case, incidentally, but when he saw how easily the other witnesses crumbled under cross-examination...
I have to tell you, I've never seen so many witnesses provide so much salacious, disturbing testimony, and I've never seen so many witnesses crumble so quickly under cross-examination. I'll probably never see it again. I mean, it almost became a circus. People would get on that stand and say they'd seen the most horrific things on the planet. There would be just a heavy atmosphere in the courtroom, so you could almost cut the silence with a knife after they were finished, and on cross-examination, they would just splatter.
He conveniently decided not to show. Curious tactics if you're convinced Michael Jackson is a hardened pedophile. Michael Jackson did not fuck kids. It does not conform to logic. It does not conform to the facts. This fiction persists in full view of contradictory timetable evidence, and when brought before a jury in 2005, as much of the evidence from 1993 was, Michael was not only exonerated, but in a trial scheduled for between 6 to 8 months, he was acquitted in less than 5. He didn't barely scrape on by, he was vindicated fucking resoundingly. And as for the so-called additional accusers, you may be interested to note that they were all disproven categorically in court in 2005 due to the aforementioned ludicrous legal statute in California permitting evidence of prior acts, often through third-party hearsay. As such, the prosecution made a miserable attempt to pin Michael to the molestation of 5 other boys.
We started our case with 3 of those 5 young men who they claim were molested, and they all said, "He never touched me." That's how we began our case, 3 of the 5. The 4th one never showed up, and if he had, I think we were armed pretty well to deal with him, and that's Larry Feldman's client. There are a lot of other issues that go into that case that I don't have time to talk about, but let's just say that I had a lot of information to go after him on, not to mention the profit motive. Why do you take money and not go to the police and prosecute? Particularly, you know, if you're a family member, do you prefer to take money instead of having police and prosecutors go after you criminally? What does that tell you about the situation? The 5th young man was a so-called youth pastor who claimed he'd been tickled by Michael Jackson outside of his genes and needed 5 years worth of therapy to deal with his trauma. And by the way, he wanted millions of dollars, his mother wanted it, and his mother also sold story to the tabloids.
Now, if I'm into kitty fucking, am I crazy? Or is Macaulay Culkin in the early 90s Not my Cindy Crawford. I mean, look at the kid. He's goddamn adorable. Or for that matter, a young Corey Feldman, at least one of whom was molested by powerful people in Hollywood and was not shy about admitting it.
I was surrounded by them when I was 14 years old. Surrounded. Literally. Didn't even know it. It wasn't until I was old enough to realize what they were and what they wanted and what they were about and the types of people that were surrounding me till I went, oh my God, they were everywhere like vultures.
Vultures who Feldman says abused him and his best friend, the late child actor Corey Haim.
Michael Jackson was a witch hunt, okay? Let me just say this. He was a guy who was so innocent, so kind of sheltered, you couldn't even swear around him. You couldn't talk about drugs. You couldn't talk about nude women. You couldn't talk about sex. You couldn't talk about anything.
And if a couple troglodytic pants-shitting bodyguards who were actively suing Michael Jackson for wrongful termination at the time and wound up not only losing, but found guilty of stealing from the King of Pop are considered credible witnesses as to Michael's sexuality, well, all right, accepting the batshit premise that security guard testimony is manna from heaven, let's talk to some goddamn bodyguards about Michael's sexuality.
Was he a pedophile?
No, we don't believe so. I don't believe so.
Not at all.
Being a father myself and being a man, men know men. He had the desires of women like we do.
In fact, they say he had at least 2 girlfriends, dispelling that other rumor.
We had a curtain that covered the back seat. You couldn't see in the back seat. They talked back there and, you know.
So he's making out in the back seat?
Or chewing loud gum.
In talking to L.A. Reid and in talking to Teddy Riley, guys who spent a lot of time with him, they both told me stories about these women in the studio. Okay, I mean, it's an interesting thing. I was, you know, everyone has their perceptions of what Michael was about. But I tell you what, L.A. Reid is a guy I know very well. I know Teddy Riley very well. These are very straight guys. And they're telling me that Michael had fine-ass women in the studio hanging out with him. I believe them. So it's interesting that there's this whole narrative about Michael as a heterosexual male, hanging out with guys I know who are very heterosexual male. But it's something interesting. He himself would never consciously, publicly, it was like he had this interesting thing.
So, that's your foolproof 1993 molestation case, folks. The one every blathering asshat in the country seems to believe was accurate. Not so much ironclad as tin-plated, isn't it? If you buy that shit as airtight, I got a Swiss cheese submarine I think you might be interested in. And one last parting shot for review tech. Hey, Richie boy, know what's even better than common sense? Fucking research! Razor fist, out! Is there any grave that is figuratively defiled on a more regular basis than that of Michael Jackson? The man's body wasn't cold before tabloid snapshots of it were circulating in the press, assiduously cataloging everything from the shape and consistency of his hairpiece to his vitiligo diagnosis to every drug in his system when he expired. Sony plundered his tomb, of course, thereafter as the estate repulsively sold the Beatles and Elvis music catalog he fought tooth and claw to never surrender in life. And now, the tabloids are back for a 4th fucking helping. This time, with the aid of a hack filmmaker and 2 long discredited dipshits in tow. The name? Leaving Neverland. A documentary, because enlisting thespians to tell you the real truth is always a good sign. Just ask Birth of a Nation, that alleges everything from child weddings to preteen pooper parties without any of that pesky fact-checking in tow. Now, I made what I believe would be my final word on the Michael Jackson allegations 2 years previous, on the mistaken assumption that once dispelled, a human being's natural tendency to fact-check and consider the source would forestall any further efforts at disinformation. And folks, I stand fucking corrected. But the spurious allegations did leap from thin fucking air, and as such we must first unveil the source. In this case, the dual source. 2 repeat accusers, both former associates of Michael Jackson's, and both of whom have the credibility of a one-armed sword fighter. The first, and for some baffling reason, widely considered most credible accuser, is one Jimmy Safechuck, who claimed, among other things, that he was abused by Jackson shortly after appearing in the 1988 Pepsi advertisement. Now, tuck that factoid away, because connecting allegations of abuse with massively public incidents that trigger an immediate emotional outcry from the public is sort of kind of recurrent element in all the Michael Jackson allegations, and I personally believe is kind of the fucking point. Now, putting aside that Jimmy Safechuck claimed in 2014, when he filed a molestation suit against the Jackson estate that, quote, this should trigger a flood of victims to come forward, and ultimately said flood amounted to literally one other fucking dude with a laundry list of credibility problems, Safechuck's assertions don't carry an ounce of weight for myriad reasons. First and foremost, he was subpoenaed to appear at the 2005 trial and ran for the fucking hills instead. Yet, as will become a familiar tale in the coming rant, upon becoming a father and getting therapy, he had a road to Damascus moment and sued the estate of a dead man for damages. Yet, here's where it gets interesting. If you read the legal briefs, all of which are available to the public, you see Safechuck's approach was to describe the MJ estate as, quote, a school, and therefore liable to all the children within it. An assertion so laughable the judge even called it out by name, but it does raise an even more alarming factor. If MJJ Productions was, as Safechuck alleges, a school, that would make them not merely civically, but criminally liable for the molestation you resoundingly fucking failed to prove. So here's a fucking query. Why didn't you file a criminal case? Whatever the answer, I'm certain it has nothing whatever to do with the fact that filing a criminal case wouldn't get you any goddamn money. Safechuck's allegations go from cockeyed to pear-shaped when it later emerged that they appear to have been copied from a 1997 book laughably entitled Michael Jackson Was My Lover, The Secret Diary of Jordy Chandler, reputed to be assembled from the private documents of Jordan Chandler, the accuser in 1993, and which ludicrously alleged the author possessed a copy of a videotape depicting Jackson having sex with a preteen child. The problem? When pressed in court to provide proof of the author's source, he failed to produce anything at all. No videotape, no diary. Jackson, needless to say, won the lawsuit, and Gutierrez fled to fucking Chile without paying a peso. Fast forward to 2014, Safechuck is now repeating multiple libidinous lies that appear to have been originally culled from the pages of Gutierrez's book. Take page 79. He describes a scene in which Jordan Chandler and another child, Brett Barnes, suffer anal contact from Jackson. But wait! In 1993, during a session with a doctor who examined Jordan Chandler, he stated outright no anal contact of any kind had taken place. To make matters worse, the other child involved in this hallucinatory scenario, Brett Barnes, still defends Jackson to this day. Check his Twitter if you don't believe me. Later, the book describes Jackson presenting a medallion as a kind of man-boy marriage token, one repeated by the ludicrous film that was just screened for the Saps at Sundance. In the book, he apparently gives this token to Wade Robson, and wouldn't you know it? In Safechuck's lawsuit, he miraculously mentioned the same medallion, but this time, the recipient is himself. Not only is Safechuck copying lies, he's copying easily disproven ones from a book that was busted for libel and slander, no less. This is the kind of shit Michael Jackson dealt with for 25 fucking years, folks, and you wonder why he's dead. As you might expect, Gimme Safechuck's lawsuit was laughed out of court in June of 2017. Yet, as Double Jeopardy precludes his trying for the same trick twice, still yearning for a payday, the Prince of Prevarication decided he'd handily skirt the suit being thrown out by amending it slightly and dovetailing it with another man's case. Wade Robson. Now, this is a name you might actually have heard of. At one time, owing I'm sure absolutely nothing to his longtime association with Michael Jackson, Robson was one of the most in-demand dance choreographers on the pop circuit. The explosion of boy bands and pop princesses in the early 2000s providing ample fodder for the fuckbag, culminating in a sordid episode you may have heard of in the Justin Timberlake single Cry Me a River, which tells the tale of his then-girlfriend Britney Spears boinking a backup dancer behind his back, ending in an inevitable breakup. Now, many have since conflated the figure named in the song as Britney's ex, Kevin Federline, but in truth, it was actually her choreographer, Wade Robson, with whom she appeared at multiple events for their blink-and-you-miss-it relationship in 2002. TMZ twattery aside, the boy band Cash had already started to dry up in 2005 when Wade Robson took part in the Michael Jackson molestation case as a witness for the defense. That's right, gang, Wade Robson, the primary source for this sweepingly factual fucking mockumentary, put his hand on a Bible and stated under oath and with zero coercion that Michael Jackson never did dick dick to him. Now you tell me, if you've been boinking a kid in the butt for 7 years, are you gonna let the same child sashay within 113 miles of the courtroom, much less allow him to potentially incriminate you by subjecting him to cross-examination on the witness stand? Even Wade Robson's own mother said in her 2016 deposition that every time she asked him point blank if he was ever touched by Jackson, he emphatically denied it. Quote, "He should have had an Oscar."
Are you still friendly with Michael?
Yeah, we still talk every couple months, catch up.
You do, really?
Yeah.
Well, what's he like?
What's he like? He's a good guy.
He's a good guy?
Yeah.
Show me where he touched you. Nothing ever like that? No nonsense, no shenanigans?
This is what the film is based on, folks! And so we ride the eternal carousel of incredulity that is Wade Robson. In short, to believe Wade Robson is to believe he is a serial fucking liar. Unless you claim he merely defended the King of Pop in a court of law as a result of a stern browbeating, Robson reiterated as recently as mere months before he alleged abuse to begin with that he was never touched, and he did so without prompting to rolling fucking video cameras.
I'm starting on Cirque du Soleil, Michael Jackson show. So it's, the equivalent of the Beatles Love show that they have, or the Elvis show, but for Michael, which is, exciting and terrifying all at the same time because it's such a huge responsibility. But that was why I took it on. Michael was such a huge part of my career and life. We were friends for 20 years before he passed, since I was 7. So it's an opportunity for me to give back a little bit to his legacy. It's such a big part of his legacy, and to make sure as much as I can that it's done right and that it really represents his essence.
And it's a hell of a thing, but after being involved with a dancing reality show, right around the time it was canceled, and shortly after not only Michael's death, but after the Michael Jackson estate decreed they would not avail themselves of Wade Robson's services in the Michael Jackson 1 project with Cirque du Soleil, it's then, and only then, that Robson, reputedly while on a boat, is struck with the same Damascus flashbang gimme safe cut beheld, and he sees the molestation light. But does he level legal accusations immediately? Hell the fuck no! Like all accusers before him, he first tries his case in the media.
Now he's breaking his silence about his claims that Michael Jackson sexually abused him beginning at age 7.
Every time we were together, it happened. There was no night that went by that I was with him that he didn't sexually abuse me.
Now, when you testified in 2005, and you took the stand and you raised your right hand and you swore under oath that nothing sexual ever happened between you and Michael Jackson, why did you lie?
I said what I understood, and I said what I was able to say.
Shortly thereafter, Robson approached the estate for an easy payday and was jollied on his fucking way. Cue the lawsuit and resultant media hyperbole. Robson lawsuit expected to trigger avalanche of accusers. Funny, where have I heard that one before? Robson's repressed memory may be key to finally bringing MJ's victims some measure of justice, which, by the by, is in direct conflict with Robson's own revised allegations. They've been revised a number of times, you see, wherein he states that his memory of the molestation was never in fact repressed, but he simply didn't know it was molestation and that it was wrong. A curious assertion given that he sat in on the 2005 trial where they explicitly stated hundreds of times that the conduct of which Michael was fallaciously accused was not only wrong, but illegal. Evidently it takes a decade or two for Robson's thinky-majig to kick the fuck in and process information he was told hundreds of times during the trial he voluntarily testified in. Interestingly enough, this also conflicts with a statement he made during the 2005 trial where he said of actual molestations, quote, "I never had that experience, and I hope it never happened to anyone else." That sound like someone who doesn't know it's wrong to you? As for the numerous Robson revisions, first, he claimed Michael Jackson told him that if he ever told anyone, they would both go to jail.
He says Jackson warned they would both go to jail if anyone found out. So for decades, Robson defended Jackson, saying he never molested anyone.
Why he would still believe that bullshit as an adult man in a courtroom in 2005, and more importantly, why he would fail to inform fucking anyone despite being asked multiple times until 4 fucking years after Michael Jackson's death, remains one of the many nebulous queries his legal team routinely fails to fucking answer. As such, he switched the story up almost immediately, claiming Michael Jackson coached him in an elaborate form of roleplay over the phone, which he alleged made him a, quote, master of deception. On that, at least, Wade, we fucking agree. The method of mastery over his hapless juvenile victims, you inquire? Brace for some serious psychoanalysis here. But Michael's entire technique, according to Wade Robson's deposition, was to say over the phone, hey, they're trying to take our careers away by lying about us and saying we did disgusting sexual stuff. Let's fight them. Click! The Mephistophelian mind of serial molester Michael fucking Jackson, my friends. And he wants us to believe that programming somehow held for 2 goddamn decades. Never mind that this contradicts with the version he gave the Sundance filmmakers, where he now alleges Michael told him the encounters were, quote, an expression of love.
Michael told me that we loved each other and that this was love, that this was an expression of our love.
Well, which is it, Robbo? Because it seems to me, depending on who you're talking to, Michael's description fucking inverts. Incidentally, Wade Robson's mother proffers still a third version of events, wherein Wade claimed he couldn't handle the shame of admitting the assaults took place, something Wade Robson's own deposition overtly contradicts. When the prosecutor explicitly asked, quote, when you testified at the criminal trial in 2005, did you feel any sense of shame? He replies, quote, no, I didn't. I didn't have any. As I stated, I didn't have any perspective on it. Before extrapolating that, quote, I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know that at any time pre-May 2012. Unquote. 3 different versions, and we're not even to the deposition yet. Motherfuckers, the George Lucas of molestation allegations, to say nothing of how utterly batshit Michael would have to be to enlist Wade Robson in his defense not only in 2005, but as far back as interviews from 1993, when he now alleges he was being actively abused.
A second family claiming to be friends with the entertainer was introduced to CNN late Thursday by an associate of Jackson's.
Yeah, you know, there's been different times where it'll just be me and Michael. Then there'll be other times where he has other friends over too. That's what, like what Brett said, it's just a slumber party. We just have a lot of fun.
And you know, I've slept in the same bed as Michael. It's just you watch cartoons, you fall asleep. You know, it's just a friendship. And I know he would never do anything to hurt my brother. He's the nicest guy you've ever met.
I've been there when these kids have been in Michael's room. I've been there with them. It's just party time. They watch videos, they eat junk food, they play video games.
Look at all that credible evidence, eh? Good thing HBO doesn't do pesky shit like fact check. And then, in December 2017, Wade Robson, with Jimmy Safechuck in tow, was once again laughed the fuck out of court. Now, the rejoinder from the fuckwits at MJ Facts is that only the estate was absolved of responsibility if the molestation indeed occurred, which sounds lovely when you subsist in an ideological fuck bubble publishing character assassination all goddamn day and huffing your own fucking farts. In reality land, where we don't use e-drama websites as primary fucking sources, the judge was Mitchell Beckloff, a family court judge, and thus more than amenable to a prospective molestation case. If he'd considered the accusations credible, even if he'd then thrown the case out on technicalities anyway, no chance in 9 nebulous hells he wouldn't have at least weighed in on the efficacy of their validity. Yet in his final ruling, Beckloff uttered not one mumbling fucking word about it. Really gets the old almonds activated, folks. Anyone with an iota of legal understanding comprehended immediately what these post-mortem accusations truly were. A flagrant attempt to incite an out-of-court settlement from an estate seeking to spare the dead singer's name from beyond the grave, at least one of which was a vengeful retaliatory act for being shut out of profits from the Michael Jackson Cirque du Soleil spectacular. One they sadly had every reason to believe they would get, given that the Michael Jackson estate is represented by the same legal team that pressured Michael to not fight the 1993 charges and settle instead for a sum most normal people would find substantial, but which Michael could make on one portion of one fucking tour. Yet inexplicably, they actually fought this time and won! Something Michael's defense attorney in 2005, Tom Mesereau, feared may not happen at all. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the ironclad credibility of the 2 primary sources for Leaving Neverland, the new folkumentary being hyperbolically described by the leaning tower of journalistic credibility at Jezebel as arresting and horrifying by the hookah-sucking hipsters at Sundance. The response is typical. Can't win it in the courts? Credibility torpedoed like the Lusitania? fuck it, try your case in the media. In fact, Robson was reportedly already shopping a book deal as early as late 2012, specifically about the Michael Jackson allegations. Man, he recovered quick. As I said, this is a familiar tactic with those looking for payouts from the King of Pop. The original accuser in 1993, bafflingly believed by most of the public to be the most credible of the allegations, was never actually intended to be a criminal case, as the family privately approached Michael for money, and it was only after they were turned down that they proceeded with a civil suit, despite the DA downright begging them to prosecute criminally. And given the recorded phone call with the father, it's pretty obvious the reason why.
This man is going to be humiliated beyond belief. He will not believe it. He will not believe what's going to happen to him. Beyond his worst nightmares. Sell one more record. If I go through with this, I win big time. I will get everything I want. They will be destroyed forever.
It's right there in white, black, and bullshit. Give me money or get wrecked in the media. Look, this is a repeated pattern with Michael, and as much as MJ fans may not want to admit it, it does stem from a character flaw, just not the horrific allegation of pedophilia. Michael, according to everyone from Corey Feldman to former wife Lisa Marie Presley, had a curious Elvis Presley-esque tendency to freeze you the fuck out if he was displeased with you in any way.
If he got uncomfortable or felt vulnerable, he would ice you out as a mechanism. He'd push you away and ice you. It was like a shark sometimes in that way. You could just it. You know, you've done him wrong or whatever, so you were out.
Now I ask you, what happens when a parent stops responding to a human fucking kid? What happens when they freeze him the fuck out? Do they calmly sit in the corner with their crayons and coloring books? Or do an overwhelming plurality set about kicking up a tantrum to secure your attention and get what they goddamn want? And nothing grabbed Michael's attention like media misinformation. If Michael had one frayed, exposed nerve, the parasites could work like a pommel horse. It was his hatred of tabloid stink pieces. And it's no accident that every accuser thereafter went to the reporters before they went to the popos, sometimes in direct defiance of police advice. And an addendum to the fuckwits who alleged that, well, the 2005 case was flimsy and that's why he got off, that 1993 case was a bottomless wellspring of criminality. Why else would he have settled out of court? Here's a happy little factoid. For all intents and purposes, Michael Jackson was acquitted of both the 2005 and 1993 cases simultaneously. See, since Michael had been persuaded to settle by his lawyers and insurance company to continue his tour in '93, DA Tom Sneddon was positively possessed. He pushed for the adoption of a statute in California that stipulates that in any case of criminal molestation, evidence of prior acts may be admitted in concert. Meaning even though the family settled in '93, the evidence was still legally allowed in court. And in the case of the mother, she did! The accuser, Jordan Chandler himself, skipped the country to avoid having to appear, mind you, which is also why 2 bodyguards and a maid that claimed Michael had boinked Macaulay Culkin in 1993 were allowed to testify. Only to be stunned when Macaulay Culkin himself, who had every reason not to show thanks to an early 2000s career revival, decided he'd be one of the very first witnesses for the fucking defense! A defense Culkin has maintained ever since!
And what happened at the house? That's what all these things
It's,
people
you know,
are
that's
concerned
what's so
about.
weird, you know.
What did happen?
Nothing happened, you know. I mean, nothing really. I mean, we played video games, you know. We you know, played it at some amusement park. Well, the thing is with that whole thing is that, you know, they go, oh, you slept in the same bedroom as him. It's like, I don't think you understand. Michael Jackson's bedroom is 2 stories. And it has like 3 bathrooms and this and that. So when I slept in his bedroom, yeah, but you have to understand the whole scenario. And the thing is with Michael is that he's not very good at explaining himself, and he never really has been, because he's not a very social person. I mean, you're talking about someone who's been sheltered and sheltering himself also for the last like 30 years.
And he wasn't the only one, with Lisa Marie Presley, who was actively warring with Michael in the press at the time, still defending his heterosexuality, even in the face of a rather tasteless grilling by Howard Stern.
Can you even tell us, all right, were you sexually satisfied by Michael Jackson?
Well, the answer would be, would I have married someone that I wasn't?
But, I mean, it was a real marriage, like between husband and wife. Yep. It was a consummated marriage. Yep. It was. Okay, that's all. Yeah, so in your mind, it was real.
To me, yes, it was.
This is one of the reasons I break company with many MJ fans when they defame Lisa Marie Presley. In late '99, Lisa had every reason to throw Michael under the bus, and she did in certain ways. But the one subject she never wavered on was that she had a normal, heterosexual, married relationship with the man and never witnessed any molestation.
As for Michael's current controversy fueled by the British documentary, that was a train wreck, you know. Lisa Marie says she never saw any inappropriate behavior.
If I had seen anything, believe me, his ass would have been hanging from a tree. So, I don't know. I never saw anything like that.
Even while actively lobbing verbal hand grenades at the guy in the wake of 2 nasty breakups, she maintained right up until his death that theirs was a perfectly normal sexual relationship. And in 2 years of marriage and another 5 fucking each other under the radar thereafter, she never saw one kid get fiddled with. Oh, and as an aside, after Wade Robson and Jimmy Safechuck had their case kicked down their teeth by an actively sympathetic judge, they combed the countryside for none other than 1993 accuser Jordan Chandler, who reportedly fled the country again. Well, there's your open and shut shit show, folks. Thrown out by a judge twice, one of whom testified under oath 10 years before that it never fucking happened, only to change his tune after the tanking of his career. But oh, now that it's in a shitty Sundance flick, it's magically fucking credible. Funny, I once saw a film about a fucking geek in green pajamas that flies through space with a magic superhero ring. Must be a goddamn documentary. And fun fact, it's not even the first film of its type. Noted disinformation foundry BBC4 aired its own Aspie Algonquin in 2011, much of which I already rebutted in my previous video. A fact I forgot to mention, though, it emerged shortly before release that the film's primary source was none other than the same Victor Gutierrez whose book Safechuck's allegations appear to be mimeographed from. Oops! But hey, now the lies are at Sundance, so that magically makes them credible. If you believe this bullshit, you also believe Jenna Jameson doesn't know the taste of penicillin. I'm Razor Fist. Try earning your money like normal people and let the poor man rest. God fucking speed! Sure, what's more sad? That HBO's Leaving Neverland narcolepsy remedy went ahead despite confirmed disinformation festooned the fuck throughout, omnipresent timeline discrepancies, and long debunked hearsay, or that a video I recorded before I'd even fucking seen it preemptively decimated almost every word of it, sight unfucking seen. As such, a third part of the Michael Jackson rebuttal was almost outright needless, and it might not have existed at all, if not for the fucking reaction. I confess, I'd forgotten what blathering fucking sheep human beings can be. It's been so long since the prolonged media-mongering shit show of 2005, the fallout of which, for the record, was much more intense toward Michael Jackson than what we're currently experiencing, and thus I'd caution both MJ fans, disbelievers, and blog-humping hacks alike to dial it the fuck down with the Michael Jackson is finally done articles, when, frankly, Michael Jackson ain't half as done as he was in 2005, and 3 years later, he was in full comeback mode. Hyperbole's a bitch. I ought to know. It's the source of my power. That said, it's a testament to the manipulative power of documentaries as a fucking format, however, that the dearth of evidence presented in Leaving Neverland, a documentary that documents absolutely nothing and features little apart from the same 2 accusers telling unconfirmable anecdotes for 4 fucking hours, in no way precluded even those who fancy themselves journalistic goddamn gumshoes from declaring that 4 hours of mood lighting, piano music, and goddamn drone shots can conceivably stand in for substantive fucking evidence. And most recently, Lil Ben Shapiro decided a mountain of countervailing evidence, 2 grand jury dismissals, and a courtroom exoneration on 14 fucking counts wasn't quite enough to overcome Wade Robson's aggressively contradictory, distemporal fucking fantasy yarn.
Yeah, that's just a normal human tendency. We tend to make snap judgments about people, and then we take those judgments too far and we generalize more broadly. Well, 2 things are true of Michael Jackson. Immensely talented human being, evil pedophile, right? Those 2 things are true of Michael Jackson, at least if the allegations are to be believed, which all evidence suggests they should be.
Yeah, what immutable evidence would that be, Ben? That Gimme Safecuck's mother claims in the documentary you claim you goddamn watched that she, quote, danced when she heard of Michael's death in 2009.
I danced when I heard that he died. I was laying in bed. The news came on. I got out of bed and I was, oh, thank God he can't hurt any more children.
despite her son stating in both a sworn court deposition and in the self-same stink piece he, quote, never realized he was abused until 2013.
He sexually abused me from 7 years old until 14.
So when you saw Wade on the Today Show, that triggered you to feel what?
I panicked. Like I was being caught, honestly.
Meaning both he and his mother are officially fucking time travelers? And hey, maybe there's something to that time traveler hypothesis, because Safechuck alleges his abuse intensified after a Grammy Award performance in 1989 in New York, despite the Grammys being held in Los Angeles that year, where Michael Jackson never once performed, by the by. All signs point to believe, do they, Benzo?
And people are having a really tough time connecting those two. They're having a really tough time overcoming the cognitive dissonance of, I like Michael Jackson's music, and I was a big fan of his when I was 10, with Michael Jackson was an evil human being who preyed upon children.
How fucking old does this ass be? Anybody above the age of a zygote remembers the 2005 fucking funnel cloud of TV and print propaganda alleging everything from hidden rape dungeons to sophisticated pedophilia networks, all of which, fucking all of it, being presented in a court of law, and all 14 counts of which he was fucking exonerated of. Ben, buddy, 4 of those counts were fucking misdemeanors. If one half of what was said in court, let alone in this laugh riot of a schlockumentary, had actually been factual, Michael would have at least been guilty of 1 of the misdemeanor counts of child endangerment. Yet for all your pronouncements that Michael paid his way out of prison, in a trial that was scheduled for 5 months, he was cleared in fucking 4. Not just not guilty, not goddamn guilty. And Michael was still routinely identified with criminal kiddie rape and broader entertainment media thereafter. Yet you're alleging people are reticent? They're having a tough time believing the bullshit accusations? On what planet and in what fucking solar system? Time Warner, CNN, ABC, MSNBC, Oprah, BBC, sources you routinely discredit for self-evident bias. All of these sources were slavering at the prospect of at last lynching Michael Jackson for the crime of which he has since been cleared. And that's without even indulging in naming the unremitting procession of unctuous obliviati, parroting what amounts to 4 hours of fucking anecdotes absent actual evidence.
This enraging film by Dan Reed inspired a lawsuit against the pay cable channel from Jackson's estate, which desperately wants people not to see a story that may significantly diminish the value of his brand. It's a wonder there's any brand left to defend, given that 4 men have now made detailed, credible claims that Jackson sexually abused them as minors.
What detail? Contradictory generalities about a general year in a general place? Look, I can kind of understand it, as on the few occasions Wade does name a specific time and place, it's later found to explicitly contradict what those in Michael's inner circle, never mind his fucking family, already know to be factual. Case in point, the segment near the end of the film where Wade obliquely alludes to Michael Jackson having a possible alcohol problem, as Mike allegedly simply left the dinner table and the children all to their goddamn lonesome.
We had some, those sort of larger red plastic cups, and he grabbed one of those and just filled one up to the brim, you know, with white wine. And Michael says, you know, I'm gonna go upstairs for a second. 30 minutes goes by. An hour goes by, you know, nothing from Michael. He never comes back down. So Amanda and I are like, what do we, you know, what do we do? And I remember asking the kids, like, do you want to go check on your dad? I mean, he's okay. And
Robson alleges it was this dinner that gave him the moral motivation to lie in court in 2005, under oath, despite a withering cross-examination by the prosecution. The problem? Dan Reed flagrantly edited the sequence to exclude the other people present. One of their names? Taj fucking Jackson, Michael's nephew. Who says it's a heaping helping a horseshit, by the way? Oh, but Taj is simply defending his dead uncle, you say. Well, once again, Wade has run afoul of the gods of time, as the dinner in question took place after he'd fucking testified in 2005. Surprise! What about Wade Robson claiming Michael Jackson gave him the Thriller jacket, even though it was actually kept by costume designer Demis Tompkins and auctioned off for $1.8 million to a random rich dude from Austin in 2011? Or James Safechuck claiming he was given Indiana Jones's bullwhip, even though there's only one bullwhip and it was donated to the Institute of Archaeology in London in 1990? Or Safechuck, again, claiming he honeymooned with Michael at Euro Disney in 1988, even though Euro Disney didn't even open until 1992, which is during a time Gimme Safechuck claims Michael was no longer speaking to him.
He had been, I think, a little absent from my life, and then he's back in it because he needs you for something. He needs you to testify. So honestly, you're like happy that he's back.
Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs! Oprah better double pack that audience with sexual assault survivors next time. Maybe if she clenches real hard and glues her Lassie wig down extra tight, it'll drown out the endless procession of basic timetable discrepancies with a wall of fucking feelings.
You feel triggered, feel
Not
me too,
immediately.
feeling raped. See people with tears in the audience. My heart melted, crying, feeling. How do you feel about that?
That's a tough one.
You'll remember that in 1995, he settled a civil suit for a reported $23 million after being accused of sexual abuse by Jordan Chandler.
Which, as I've already explained many times, is a happy byproduct of California law, which at that time ludicrously allowed a civil suit to be filed in advance of a criminal one. Meaning Michael Jackson's legal team would not only have had to prepare for a twin fucking defense against simultaneous, salacious court cases that would already be tried in media, but who, with a functioning fucking medulla, would motherfucking believe a civil case, even one that would have found Michael Jackson innocent, would not irreparably bias a prospective criminal jury against the goddamn defendant? Even if he won, and he would have, the jury in the criminal case would have been biased from the get-go simply because the civil suit existed at all. Michael's legal team begged the judge in '94 to postpone the proceeding until after the criminal case, as any rational being would assume it already would have been, and they were refused 6 separate times. And through all Shapiro's shrieking about payoffs, what the National Review's Retardation Showcase fails to fucking mention is that settling a civil case does not dispose of the criminal one. All the evidence in the case was already collected at that point, including nude photographs of Michael Jackson, the victim's sworn descriptions of his genitals, which, contrary to popular belief, must not have matched the genuine article, as the prosecution elected not to fucking enter them into evidence. Fucking oops! Unsurprisingly, in 1994, 2 separate grand juries decided not only was there not enough evidence to convict, there wasn't even enough evidence to indict.
Since August 1993, the Los Angeles Police Department, the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department, the Santa Barbara District Attorney's Office, and the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office have been investigating allegations of child abuse involving singer Michael Jackson. That investigation is now complete. The young boy who was the catalyst for this investigation has recently informed us that he does not wish to participate in any criminal proceeding where he is named as a victim. We must decline prosecution involving Mr. Jackson.
They got no evidence. There is no corroborating evidence. They impaneled a grand jury in Santa Barbara. Now, a grand jury can indict this remote control unit if it wants to. You don't need hardly anything to get an indict. You can indict a ham sandwich, for crying out loud. There was no evidence. But how many of you have been thinking Michael Jackson was guilty for the whole year simply because the press had all these people? Cops raid Michael Jackson's homes, Peter Pan or pervert, pop star and sex probe. For the whole year since this thing came up, the American people have assumed Michael Jackson's guilty because the press has assumed he's guilty. It's an accusation for which there's no defense. The minute the accusation's leveled, you're guilty.
But remember Shapiro's own words, kiddies.
At least if the allegations are to be believed, which all evidence suggests they should be.
But wait, it gets better.
During his criminal trial, Jackson urged both Safechuck and Robeson, now adults, to testify he had done nothing inappropriate with them. Safechuck simply declined, and in his silence, he incurred Jackson's wrath. He threatened me with his lawyers and said I had perjured myself years ago. He recalls the lawyers would get me. He says Jackson told him.
Putting aside that Scott Ross, the private investigator employed by the defense to cross-examine prospective witnesses, namely his statement this past week that Safechuck was not only never asked to testify in 2005, he was, quote, a non-entity.
Motions in limine are to prevent things coming in that are irrelevant. Safechuck, there was a declaration filed, I think, sometime in 93 or 94, 95, whatever, somehow in connection with the Jordy Chandler matter. And Safechuck had signed a declaration saying that, yeah, nothing happened. Michael never did anything, blah, blah, blah. He no longer had contact with Michael. And so Safechuck, for purposes of the trial, was what we would call a non-entity. The judge had already ruled nothing regarding Safechuck was going to be allowed. Nothing was going to be discussed. No evidence one way or the other. Safechuck, for purposes of this trial, didn't exist. So when I hear these stories that Evie Tavashi, who was Michael's personal assistant for 20 some odd years, was calling Safechuck repeatedly and begging him to testify.
And he asked me to testify, and I said no. And he got really angry at me. He threatened me with his lawyers and said that I had perjured myself years ago and that he was the best lawyers in the world and that they were going to get me. And I just said, I don't want any part of it. You'll hear nothing from me.
It's not even absurdity. The stupidity of that comment is beyond belief, simply based on the fact that it's not up to Evie Tavashi to decide who's going to testify. It wasn't even up to Tom. It wasn't even up to Snedden at that point. At that point, the judge had already long since ruled, well over 7-8 months before, that Safechuck was a non-entity.
Benjo, didn't you graduate from goddamn Harvard? How is it possible you're not aware that a judge in a criminal case approves court witnesses well in motherfucking advance? How could Michael Jackson beg Gimme Safechuck to cock-a-doodle-doo in court, let alone incur his righteous wrath for not fucking doing so, if, as Safechuck himself alleges in the documentary, the court case was already ongoing? That isn't how court cases work, kid! Didn't you go to school for this shit? More to the point there, paralegal eagle, why in world-rending fuck would he want two kids he kitty fuck to be witnesses in his trial, and thus subject to cross-examination, during which they could easily break the fuck down and goddamn incriminate him, particularly when defense lawyer Tom Mesereau has gone on record as stating, if Wade didn't want to do it, someone else could have, and that the only reason they put Robson first was because after 6 years of estrangement, Robson himself had volunteered to tee up against the prosecution. In fact, it was precisely this gung-ho attitude that persuaded Mesereau Robson was the logical choice for a fucking leadoff hitter.
And if you put on a defense case in a criminal trial, you always want to start with a powerful witness. He was very powerful for us. He said that nothing untoward had ever happened, and then he withstood a very powerful cross-examination by a very seasoned prosecutor, and Wade Robson never changed his position.
That's why it's so absurd, because Wade Robson wasn't going to take the stand if he couldn't get through me. Wade Robson had to get through me, then he had to get through Susan and Tom, then he had to get through the police, being Sergeant Steve Robel and Lieutenant Jeff Klappis. And these two guys are incredibly experienced detectives. Not to mention, what I had said before, not to mention when you're under cross-examination, how do you get through the likes of Tom Snedden, Ron Zonin, and Gordon Auchincloss? And the fact is, once we turn over the witness list, they're perfectly capable of doing these interviews, and they did. So again, how is it that Wade Robson, he outsmarted all of us?
As you should know, as a theoretical lawyer yourself, the first witness for the defense is generally subjected to full court fucking press from the prosecution's cross-examination, particularly when said witness is a young boy, now a man, in a sensationalist molestation trial whose very presence and testimony dismantles the motherfucking narrative. Why put Wade Robson there if he had been fucked when there were, according to Tom Mesereau, dozens of other witnesses who hadn't been allegedly fucking fiddled. Man alive, Michael must have been mighty comfortable in his goddamn grooming practices. Practices Wade Robson describes in his sworn deposition as, quote, a single fucking phone call. Yet said programming was evidently so profound, MJ was willing to risk being hauled off the kitty diddler prison by putting up one of the members of his preteen pooper posse on the witness stand.
Well, there are a bunch of lessons to be learned here. Well, some of those lessons include, again, our capacity for cognitive dissonance blinding us to the reality.
Right? Like Big Ben's capacity to believe Wade Robson and James Safechuck lied every single time, except when they stood to gain $1.5 billion dollars in a lawsuit. Like believing Wade Robson's ludicrous assertion that, quote,
I want to be able to speak the truth as loud as I had to speak the lie for so long.
Despite the carefully fucking omitted fact that he filed his original lawsuit under seal to secure a silent payday. Whoops! Ben, buddy, facts don't give a fuck about your feelings. As for my own viewing, look, I watch live with each and every one of you on Periscope, links for which are in the description, so view them at your leisure, but brace for bullshit regardless, because the long-dead dogshit accusations come hard and... well, they come hard anyway. What I expected, given the emotionally arresting reaction described by the Sundance viewership, was a deluge of disinformative information I'd have to assess or debunk depending on the validity of the source material. And so, as you saw in part 2, I muscled up on my MJ allegation history. I went ahead and read through the entire transcript of Wade Robson's 2005 testimony, and I steeled myself for the fuckery to come. And then, as the conductor raised his hands aloft and the symphony of stupidity warmed up in unison, what emerged was a spider fart. In short, Leaving Neverland has nothing. Literally nothing. But anecdotes. Gang, that's the evidence. Dudes and their immediate families telling stories. Never mind that Wade Robson's on his 4th or 5th fucking version at this point. Never mind that Safechuck's on 3, closing in on 4. This is all the evidence the moving-going public requires to reverse course on Michael Jackson for time immemorial. Okay, maybe I should temper that description, as Leaving Neverland, hype notwithstanding, failed to set a matchbook on fucking fire in the ratings category, being outdrawn not only by third-string reality shows in its own time slot, but also by the previous night's rerun of a year-old fucking rock film, Skyscraper. Unsurprisingly, on the literally 2 or 3 occasions where it does saunter into specifics, it emerges with mountains of inconsistencies. In one harrowing sequence, one director, Dan Reed, has since admitted was actually filmed in pickups, meaning after filming was formally concluded, James Safechuck miraculously located his childhood wedding ring. One I already pointed out in part 2 of the MJ rebuttal was originally an accusation culled from Victor Gutierrez's book in '97, which was sued for slander and lost.
And I say married because we had this mock wedding ceremony, and the ring is nice. It has a row of diamonds. It's hard to go back to that moment.
No inscription, no possible method of verifying it actually came from Michael Jackson, just, hey, here's a ring I could have got from K Jewelers, Walmart, or a goddamn gumball machine, please believe my ass. Made all the more suspicious by the fact he concedes beforehand that at the same ceremony, he and Michael reportedly filled out wedding vows.
We did this in his bedroom, and we, filled out some vows.
Which begs the fucking question. If you kept a kitty fucker's promise ring for 20 plus fucking years, why didn't you do the same for the vows? If Michael kept them, why weren't they among his effects during the surprise raid of Neverland? And so begins a familiar malady. Salacious descriptions of every lurid act under the yellow sun flow freely, and the accusers even take care to include utterly innocuous Polaroids of Michael Jackson chilling in a red shirt, watching TV, playing ping pong, whatever the world-rending fuck isn't incriminating. Indeed, the Robsons and Safechucks appear to have assiduously archived every Michael Jackson missive, no matter how innocuous, from birthday greetings to hey what the fuck up phone messages to simple scribbles to say hi. Yet remarkably, all the texts and faxes, the phone calls and illicit encounters they allege occurred that might have conceivably provided the faintest fucking substantiation have all been conveniently lost to the rigors of time. A kawinky of a ding-dong-dink if I've ever heard one. All manner of emotionally manipulative pablum, from allegations Michael Jackson massacred his mother's marriage to mock weddings and hotel room reach-arounds, are exhaustively alleged in vivid, four-dimensional delineation. Problem is, the proof never comes along for the ride. And for a dead man, not extended the defamation protection afforded the fucking living, let alone one exonerated in record time of 14 fucking counts in court, I'd say that's an itty-bitty oversight. In the absence of factual fucking scrutiny, familiar fuckbags have emerged from the woodwork. Bodyguards sued for slander, multiple maids who did likewise. 60 Minutes Australia decided a full fucking hour should be dedicated to Adrian McManus, a member of the infamous Neverland Five, and a woman long since beshitted in court when she claimed Jordan Chandler, Brett Barnes, and Macaulay Culkin had been molested before her very fucking eyes, only for Culkin himself to appear in court and reveal her to be a flagrant fucking liar. Mind you, this was a full decade after she made a sworn statement in '93 that she never witnessed the faintest impropriety from the pop star. Perhaps most damaging of all, Adrian McManus explicitly admitted she was coached and aided at every turn by, you guessed it, our old pal, Victor Gutierrez. Man, that fella gets the fuck around.
At Michael Jackson's trial, you were found to have lied under oath.
Okay, now I'm going to explain that.
Centering an entire mini-documentary around a witness whose credibility was incinerated well over a decade ago.
She and 4 other employees sued the singer for wrongful termination and lost.
Do you still owe the Jackson estate money?
I probably do, but Michael's dead now, you know.
To call him Leaving Neverland deceptively edited borders on cartoonishly charitable. At one point, a clip is presented out of context, one I've been hit with repeatedly as evidence of child abuse, wherein Michael is asked what the best thing about Hawaii is, to which he appears to respond with the words, being with James Safechuck.
Why? What was your best thing? My best thing about Hawaii? Being with you.
This is, in fact, clipped from a mock interview Safechuck submitted into evidence in his case against the estate in 2013, which, as we all know, was thrown out faster than a W-2 form at Wesley Snipes' house. The problem? If you examine the available court documents, it's abundantly clear the clip's been filleted to fucking shit, as his full response is actually, quote, the best thing about being in Hawaii is spending time with Jimmy and Jimmy's family, and I can't wait to spend more time with them. Now, why would Dan Reed, a dehydrated scrotum with an English accent, make a convenient cut right before the fucking part about hanging with the entire family, I wonder? Whatever the reason, I'm certain it's nothing at all to do with the fact that it's featured in a segment where Safechuck alleges Michael kept him in isolation from his fucking family.
He's working on pushing you away from your parents, or pushing you away from everybody else, and like it's just you and him.
You see, for all his vapid platitudes about sparking a debate and spurring a discussion, the truth is, Dan Reed doesn't want the faintest fucking beginnings of scrutiny, not in his film or indeed in his ever-loving life. Because when Diamond Dan at last vacated the U.S. media hug box Oprah painstakingly erected for his feckless ass and returned to grey old England, at long last, he was finally fucking pressed by, of all people, Piers Morgan.
Other than what they're saying, did you unearth any actual evidence?
You are.
Well, is it not true they're trying to
This isn't
sue?
about money. This isn't
Right.
what the Michael
So
Jackson...
they're not suing for money?
Well, they're suing for justice. And
do they want money?
I don't know. You should ask them.
Well, you know the answer.
I ask you, how did it take this long for a reporter to dare to broach these basic questions? Folks, when the only journalist actually doing his job is Piers fucking Morgan, you know the profession is fucked beyond reckoning. Or Reed's further defense in providing only one side of the story, saying anyone with contrary evidence would be, quote, irrelevant.
What is the journalistic value of interviewing someone who says, well, Michael was a really nice guy and he'd never do anything to a child, particularly if that person has a gigantic vested interest in your financial interest?
Well, fuck back When facts are irrelevant, we truly do live in a kangaroo court society. A fuckmire of mass media manipulation long since divested of relevance, but as Leaving Neverland attests, still possessing unparalleled destructive influence. For an audience that unflinchingly accept the occasionally unsubstantiated and more often outright disproven allegations in a documentary that repeatedly argues how easy it is for a single individual to manipulate a single child, you sure as shit are quick to turn a blind eye to how easily mass media is playing your witless asses like a fucking viola. And considering said propagandist media tactics are the precise practices alternative media figures like Ben Shapiro or Tim Pool profess to eschew, that's a dangerous habit to indulge further, my friends. Sketchy doesn't begin to cover this cock and bullshit. These allegations are a splatter paint away from being a goddamn Jackson Pollock painting. I'm Razor Fist. God fucking speed. Anyone who's watched me for any length of time knows I'm well estranged from the concept of the postscript. What I record at the moment is generally what the fuck it is, and as such, must stand or fall on its fucking own. Sadly, I have to suspend this tradition momentarily due to the unprecedented behavior of the makers of Leaving Neverland, namely, its director, Dan Reed. He was cruising along quite comfortably, provided it was only on American outlets, beholden as they butt-fucking are to Oprah and her cowardly lion wig. It was a foregone conclusion he'd be frolicking through a fucking pillow fort in American interviews. And then he crossed the Atlantic. After being pressed by Piers Morgan, other outlets began to question the veracity of the documentary as well, with Michael's nephew, Taj Jackson, and even his brothers pointing out the self-same timeline discrepancies I itemized in the video you just watched. And wouldn't you know, just in time for the UK airing of the documentary, those segments simply vanished.
I felt like I would break. Like I couldn't be as strong as I needed to be.
We had dinner the night before at Neverland, and he was definitely subdued.
So we were at the ranch with all his family.
And he wasn't there. What if he loses? What if he goes to jail? And these are the last couple of times that they see their daddy. Built my conviction even that much more.
He wanted to support Michael. To me, it was like here was his, lifelong friend that just really needed him.
Like I couldn't be as strong as I needed to be.
To me, it was like here was his, lifelong friend.
And then they were gone, such that the full running time of the UK version is actually dropped from the over 4-hour-long version here in America to just 3 hours and 35 minutes. A mighty corpulent cut for Testimony, Variety, National Review, and Daily Wire, not to mention Mr. Shapiro, described as irrefutable. A state I'd suspect HBO might want to do some legwork on, given that they have until the 21st to respond to the Jackson Estate's lawsuit, and I suspect the prosecuting attorneys will be up to the homework Dan Reed was too biased or butt-fucking lazy to bother doing. Damage control on a months-old media narrative of this magnitude is like trying to slam a revolving door there, Dr. Evil, because letting the cat out of the bag is a fuck of a lot easier than getting the furry bastard back in. I'm Razor Fist. God fucking speed!